So one of the reasons why we do this every year is to make sure that people can anticipate what to expect with our services. So I'm just going to very quickly run through our presentation of all of the different things that go into fighting snow in the city of New York, and then we'll take you upstairs and let you look at the equipment that we use. So just a brief look at history and how things have changed. This is an original 1970s emergency snow plan. The best thing about this is not working.
There it goes.
Okay. That I have 7 days or 6 days to actually clear the snow on the tertiary streets in the city of New York. Obviously, that is no longer the expectation, and we have come a long way since then. So we start preparing for snow literally in the middle of the summer. As soon as we finish up with the snow season, which is April 15th, hopefully, we pull all of our equipment out of service and begin doing upgrades for all of our spreader equipment. We also begin night plow operations as we came in at the beginning of November, which means that we put many people to collect recycling or refuse on the overnight shifts so that when we are splitting them into 12 hours, we're not changing people's sleep cycle too aggressively. But we are looking at weather all day long through our vendors. We have 3 vendors that we speak to multiple times a day. And as soon as there's the sign of any frozen precipitation in the forecast, we start gearing up and making decisions about how we're going to operate. So in advance of any of our winter weather, we send out a snow alert, and that is to make sure that you know, the public knows, as well as our other city agencies, that we are seeing a threat on the horizon and we need to start getting prepared. When snowfall is going to be more than 2 inches, we're going to start to think about splitting the shift because then we are going to need to begin plowing up all of the equipment. Plowing up all of our sanitation equipment can take anywhere from 12 to 18 hours because each plow weighs about a ton. So the salt spreaders will begin applying salt with the first sign of any precipitation to make sure that we are getting out ahead of what could be a severe storm. We want to suppress those accumulations in the city of New York. So historically, we've only used salt and calcium chloride to really treat the streets, but one of the things that we intend to do this time is we have gotten additional brine equipment. We experimented a little bit last year with it, and we are going to be out probably way ahead of any frozen precip. So you will see us out focused on what we've identified as 300 miles of ramps and overpasses that tend to freeze first and cause the most hazards for drivers. And so we are going to be probably 24 hours ahead of any precip brining the streets. So plowing does not begin when snow starts. Plowing does not begin until we have 2 inches of snow on the ground. And one of the things you should also know is it's not going to make the streets blacktop. We keep the plows above the street by about 2 inches because otherwise we will catch every manhole cover in the city of New York, which would cause its own hazard. And they will be continuously on their routes for the entire time that we view this as a threat moving forward. In terms of pedestrian infrastructure, we have a variety of different approaches to those. One is that we have snow laborers that we call in. We also use our job training participants to clear bus stops, crosswalks, and make sure that pedestrians can move around. We have smaller pieces like skid steers and pickup plows to deal with the bike lane infrastructure. But this is always going to be happening sort of post the completion of snowfall. And then what happens when we're done, when the snow has stopped falling and there are big piles all over the streets of New York? Well, we continue to pile up the snow and in some cases haul it out, but we also will turn the plow the other direction and face it to the left, and then more or less try and incentivize melting of that snow. So add additional salt to that to try and get that to melt. We have lots of snow equipment. So we have the salt spreader, the traditional salt spreader, as well as what we call the holster, which is a small spreader. It holds about 2 tons. Then we have all of the sanitation trucks that can be plowed up. For very, very deep snow and for our salt loading operations, we have front end loaders. For very tiny streets, we have skid steers to try and get in there, otherwise known as bobcats as a industry name. And then for very significant snowfalls, we have our snow melters. Every year, we have on hand about 300,000 tons before the start of the season. We have contracts in place to be at another 550,000 tons of salt, and they're located all over the city so that we can reduce any time that the spreader is off its route going to or from the salt pile. So there are 31 permanent and 11 seasonal. We also add calcium chloride to make it so that the salt will effectively melt snow at lower temperatures. So we spend a lot of time thinking about how to efficiently route our vehicles. And so we have 3 different types of routes. One is our critical routes, which are going to be highways, streets that have police stations, streets that have schools, and then we have our sectors, which are the basic neighborhoods, and then we have what are halters for the very small street. There are specific routes for that piece of equipment. But we have made them more efficient over time by sectoring our fleet and making sure that those routes and that fleet stays in those neighborhoods and is making as efficient a route as possible. Oops. But one of the things that also happens is you're in the middle of a snowstorm, you've been given a route that's different than your refuse route, and we need you to actually be efficient in riding it. So we have put turn-by-turn directions in all of our vehicles to make sure that sanitation workers, no matter where they might be working in the city of New York, know exactly what where they're going in very hazardous conditions. Because you might be a sanitation worker who normally works Brooklyn, and now you're in Staten Island. You might not be able to see street signs easily, so we want to make sure that you have all of the technology at your fingertips to do your job well. In terms of what we are looking at a management level, we have what is called our GPS room, so we can track all of our vehicles, but that's not the only thing that we're tracking. We're also tracking complaints, we're tracking the weather, we're tracking all of the cameras in the city of New York. We also staff people at the police department as well as at DOT to make sure that we are seeing all the traffic impacts. For the public, we want you to be looking at Plow NYC, which will show you whether or not your street has been passed recently, how long ago we've come by, and give you information about what's happening in your neighborhood. We have gotten a lot more sophisticated in terms of the technology we're using and the algorithms to make sure that when we say that street's been plowed, that we have that data. There are still challenges with GPS technology, particularly under the elevated subway lines, which can cause the GPS signal to ping not directly to the satellite. In terms of what the public and business community is responsible for during any snowstorm, so after the last flake has fallen, generally you have about 4 hours to begin shoveling your sidewalk. Obviously on the overnight that is extended, and so it's 14 hours before midnight, and then it's after 11 if it's past that time. So obviously we're not expecting you to wake up in the middle of the night and shovel your sidewalk, but we are anticipating that by the time we get into the morning that you should be out there and also helping to clear and ensure that people can safely move around the city. If you have a complaint, you should call 311. We are looking at those complaints. We are not going to pull our trucks off the route before they have completed it, but when the snowfall stops, we will go back and look at those to make sure that we hit every block. But we are looking at that on a map to see where we are getting complaints coming in. And that is all I have for you. So I don't know if you have any questions before we go look at the vehicles. You just want to go see trucks.
Can you explain how people can see that app, or where they can go for it?
Oh, certainly. So Plow NYC is on, if you just Google Plow NYC, you can find that. It is on either through DSNY's website, there's a link, as well as through Do It, as well as through OEM. And so we think that it's a very important. The one thing I will tell you is if you are on a mobile device, you have to really reload and zoom in, because the data won't reload as fast as it will if you're on a regular computer.
The GPS signal, does it waver depending on the strength of the storm because of cloud cover?
We have never had a problem with strength of storm. Where we usually have struggle with our GPS signal is literally under those elevated highways, because all of that metal moves the signal around.